Thank you for joining today's Learning Lab. I am Chase Linsenbigler. What I do here at WiSys is I manage partner enablement. I am a former customer-facing consultant, so I am pretty familiar with the types of problems and specifically the types of labels and things like that that a lot of our customers require. So today is going to be geared, more toward the type of label or the type of situation that I feel like a lot of our customers find themselves in when doing a customization for a label. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of that. I'm working on producing a lot more content for our WiSys users this year, and this is really the first important step in that with these learning labs. We're doing them for customers and partners. It's going to continue on the third Tuesday of each month for the rest of the year. So, if you're a person who's very interested in learning more about WiSys and you want to, see more tools and learn some more advanced things, you can block that time off on your calendar. It'll be the same time each month, 2:30 to 3:30, and it's the third Tuesday of each month. We have a lot of really cool things on the docket for this year, and we're going to go through kind of every aspect of the WiSys product pretty much in the first year here. So you should get a lot out of these sessions. In addition to that, we're working on some other things, just like more videos for online to help teach you about our forms and standard processes, as well as some documentation so that everybody can have that out there to easily review if you need to write up on what a specific form does or what a process flow should look like. We're working to develop some more things like that as well. Now to the important part though, what are we going to cover today? So today we're going to go through Label Designer. We're going to do a general overview at the beginning. And my goal there is to kind of level set this. I know with our customers, there's varying levels of experience with the WiSys design tools. So we're going to do enough of an overview that if you've never touched any of our design products, you can understand what's going on and follow along and get to a point where at the end of this session, you'll feel comfortable going in there and playing around. But that overview is also going to serve as a good refresher for anybody who's used Label Designer in the past. We're just going to touch on, what all the standard functionality is in there and some of the main things that we're going to be doing, and just gloss over the whole product as a whole so that you're ready to dive in when we get to our custom label. So after that, we're going to customize a standard WiSys label. That's going to be our out-of-the-box GRPO label. And how we're going to do that is we're going to rearrange the label. We're going to add a barcode, a text field that is just hard coded, a text field that pulls data from SAP Business One. Then we're going to add an image. In this case, I'm just going to be using a WiSys logo, and we're going to treat it as if we were using, just a company logo. We wanted our company logo on the label. That's the way we're going to behave with the image, but there's some other details to that and other things we can do with an image that we'll talk about in today's session. Then once the label's done, we're going to set it all up in Document Manager so that it can print from our standard out of the box GRPO form on Agility 360. And we'll cover all that and show you how it prints and how we can get it up and running. So this is the label in question that we're going to start with. This is our out of the box GRPO label. As you can see here, the body of the label is fairly plain. This is where we're going to make some changes. We're going to take it from pretty standard item information up here to some item and batch information. Now I know batch doesn't necessarily apply to all of you, but it's a little bit of a more advanced field that we typically have to pull to labels. So it's something that'll just give you some experience for tracking down more detailed item information in the system. We would do this really similarly to a serial field or really any other field you want to do. This isn't super specific to batch. We are going to pull batch data, but it's more so just learning the feel of Label Designer. So now as we go into customizing this label, we're going to use this as kind of like our spec sheet. I know a lot of you guys, when you approach our consultants with a request for a tailored application or a tailored label, you usually have a spec sheet for what you want it to look like, especially with the labels. And that could either be in the form of, you actually do have a document online that's a requirement from somebody that you ship to for a shipping label. They need it to look this way. We get sheets like that, or maybe it's a situation where you've been using the same labels for 30 years you want to continue using those labels out of WiSys and you want something that looks similar, this is how those types of things are typically delivered to us, to create them for you guys. So we're going to go and kind of take this the same way here. So this is our spec sheet. This is the label we're trying to create in the system. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open up Label Designer. So for anybody not super familiar with the WiSys product, here, let me make this full screen. Label Designer is, if there's a shortcut, it's LS is the shortcut, little box with LS for Label Studio. And it can also be found in Program Files x86, our WiSys folder, and then the bin folder. That's where all of the WiSys products will be housed if you need some help looking for that. So now it just doesn't look like it's going full screen for me, but we'll deal with that. So we're going to start here with our goods receipt PO label. Very similar file path to what I just described to find the product. If we go ahead and open up our label here, it's in Program Files x86, our WiSys folder, and then in our document folder here. That's where you're going to find all of your out-of-the-box WiSys labels. As you can see in here, I have some things that are customized that I made myself and put into this folder. It's a good rule of thumb to keep all of your labels in this same area, just so you have a repository there of every label in your system. But anything out of the box, you get it installed. Whenever you have WiSys installed, you get all these labels, and they're sitting there in your system ready to be used and ready to print from our out of the box forms. But again, we're just going to use our goods receipt PO label here. So now when we're looking at a label, we're doing our overview of Label Designer here now. It's pretty similar to how any of our other design tools work. The user interface on here is drag and drop, but it's all powered by a SQL query in the background. So before we get into this stuff, and when I say drag and drop, literally it's, you can grab it and drag it around and drop it where you want it, right? But before we get into all that, we're going to talk about what runs our label, what works behind the scenes to get it the data we need, and how we put a SQL query on there. So if I go up to my data tab here and select SQL query, this is going to bring up our query editor. And I know that amongst our customers here too, there's varying levels of SQL experience. It's not a problem if you don't have SQL experience. This isn't, what this session's about. You may have somebody creating the SQL query for you. That's fine. If you make the query on your own, we're just going to talk about a couple of tips in here first before we really get into the design of the label. So basic SQL query, we're just doing a select statement to pull data out of SAP. We're pulling a variety of different fields that apply to the GRPO. The most important thing to talk about here, though, is parameters and how they work. So if I click on my parameter list here, we have doc entry. You'll see that aligns to our where statement, where we have the doc entry in our GRPO, or in our GRPO, and how that will apply to the parameter. So what's passed in this parameter will tell us what doc entry number we want to look at in the tables. This is really important because anytime you customize a WiSys label, you have this infrastructure already created in the label, right? We know what we need to hook up to our out-of-the-box forms for them to work correctly, right? So in this case, our out-of-the-box GRPO form, it needs that doc entry number to be fed to the label to print the correct label, right? So this is how that form talks to the label. So we always want to make sure that's the same language, and that's one of the big advantages of copying an out-of-the-box label instead of creating something from scratch. So your parameter, again, is what the handheld application enters into the label for the label to, be able to go retrieve the data. And in this case, we're using doc entry. Also, for those of you that might not have as much SQL experience, there are still some options for you in here where you can add some fields to the query. As long as the query is accessing the tables, you can actually use our query editor here to check boxes of different fields that you want added. So if we want our printed flag, whether or not this was printed added to it, we can do that here. If we want our doc status added, we can do that. And just simply by checking the box, it's added to the query. So there are some, basically no code options in here for you if you need access to some more fields. All right. So that's the query that pulls all of the data. That's really the heart and the soul of the label here. That's how we're getting all the information. Now, let's talk about the ribbon a little bit and some of the different options and settings and things that you're going to do to your label. So a lot of this is self-explanatory up here. Things like, creating a new label, save as, your editing stuff, cut, copy, paste, undo, redo. Those are things that are very similar to your standard, like Microsoft Office suite products. If you're familiar with PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, it's a lot of controls that are really similar to what you would do in there. But one of the first, kind of basic controls that we need to talk about here is setup. So setup is a key feature because all of our WiSys labels are set to, have a certain dimension already out of the box. Typically that's 4x3, and these labels are set up, they're just going to print 4x3 unless you make a change to them. Now this causes an issue sometimes because people don't realize where you go in and you change the dimensions of that label. Sometimes that's kind of a lost aspect of it, and people will be under the impression that, okay, this label has to be this size. Okay, I can't use it. Well, let's say we wanted this label to be 4x6. If I do that in here under setup and I save it, it'll simply grow the amount of label area that we have. It's not going to grow the label itself, but then you have the ability just to drag down things and resize the fields on your label there, so that it will simply fit what your label dimensions are. And I know that each and every one of you probably have different label dimensions. Sometimes you use different size labels for different things in the warehouse. That's how you're going to be able to control that there, is from within setup here. I'm going to bring that back down to 4x3. Now let's talk about the fields for the label. So first we have text. Text and barcode are going to be the two main fields that you use on every single label. You're going to run into these fields all the time, and they're going to be things that you're going to get real comfortable with really fast as you're using our product. So if we go into our text field here, there's two different types of text fields. When I click off of this, you'll see this does not have anything in the top right corner of the box, while several text fields here have this blue image. That's what's telling us there's a connection to the database. So that's how we know a field is pulling data from SAP Business One. These fields that don't have it, like our received and our quantity, they're simply like titles, right? They're hard-coded text fields that will always say the same thing every single time you print the label, where these ones are text fields that are going to actually pull data from SAP. So the question is, how's that done? If we go here to our properties, there's really going to be two areas from within our properties that we need to talk about. A lot of these settings you're never going to touch. So let's just focus on the two main things that you're going to interact with here. Number one is your data tab, and simply just this data field. So data field is how we tell it that this text field needs to pull data from SAP Business One. If we click on this arrow right here, we can see all of the fields that we queried in our SQL query above. That's going to be all the information that you can pull to your label from SAP based on the query. So this is your list of fields that you can use. If something that you need is not there, then changes will have to be made to the query, and we will discuss that a little bit later as we tailor our label. But if I want to set this up to pull something, let's say I want this to pull card code, I just simply select it, click here, and now it's set up to pull data. You see your blue flag there so that you can confirm that's pulling data from the SAP system. And now it is set up. If I want to change that back to just a hard-coded field, I simply clear out my data field here, click down in here for the change to take place. You see that blue mark drop off, and now I can go up here to my appearance, and I can change my text. Let's say I want to change it back to text 9, which is what it was before. I just simply type that in here, click off in my gray, and now it's hard-coded again. Appearance has also several other features very similar again to like your Microsoft products, where you're able to go in there and change font and things of that nature. So we can go in here and we can change our font, we can change our font size, we can add an underline, we can bold text, we can change the alignment to be centered or aligned to the right or left. All of those features are done under appearance. So when you're dealing with a text field, again, anything to change the way it looks is going to be in appearance here. You simply click that font drop down and you have access to almost anything that you're going to need for changing the actual look and appearance of the text field. If you're hard coding, that's going to be done in this text field here in the appearance section. And if you're pulling data from SAP, that's going to be done in this data section here in this data field. And that is the in and out of our text boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now let's talk about barcodes. So barcode, same thing. It can be hard coded, but when it comes to a barcode, we're talking 98% of the time, 99% of the time, we're pulling data from SAP Business One for our barcodes. It really doesn't save you a lot of time in most cases to hard code them. If it's something accessible, like something we may cross sometimes is somebody is going to have a barcode for their warehouse and they always do it out of warehouse 01. So they're like, okay, let's just hard code that. Well, on the off chance that you start using another warehouse or you need a couple of labels for another warehouse, then it's hard coded. It's not going to pull data, where it's pretty simple just to query that warehouse out of SAP as well. So typically I'm going to recommend that you have this actually pull data from SAP, but you do have the ability to hard code it. So now if I jump back over to the right side here, there's 3 sections on the barcode that we're going to talk about. Everything else, don't worry about it. I know there's a lot of settings in here. Chances are you're not going to hit these settings. And if you do, that's why you have our support team and our WiSys consulting team that can help you through and help you understand some of the additional settings. But today we're going to, try not to get that deep because that's very deep for label designer. All right. So where do I set up what data the barcode is going to pull? Once again, that's in our data section down here, and then our data field. And here you'll see we do that drop down same as before, and we have all of our various fields. Now it's important to note that once I change my barcode field, let's say I'm changing it to be a description barcode, it actually assigns human readable text automatically. And in a lot of cases, like what we see, with these titles and different fields, you might already have a title there, so that's redundant, or you just don't want the human readable. It could be confusing for the worker, something of that nature. The way that we take that off is up here in appearance. You simply go to text like you did before for your text field, and you just clear that out, click back in your gray, and now your barcode is set up with that new field. See, it's still pulling description, but in this case, we were able to remove that human readable. Now, if you do want the human readable, this is where you can customize, again, the style, the font, the size, all of those different options, same as a text field before, apply to the human readable right up here in your appearance section. So when assigning data to our barcode, again, that's done in the data section, data field. And if we want to remove the human readable text that comes with it, we go up to the appearance field and just clear out that text section there. Now, lastly, on barcodes, the most important piece of this is, the ability to access a variety of different barcodes in the system, right? So, it's very common that we have customers that have a spec sheet and it does explain, okay, we need a QR code here and we need an EAN 14 here. Those specifications are often made. That can be changed here in symbology. And what you're going to notice is we have a massive list in here of different barcode symbologies. So it's been few and far between that I've ever had a customer ask me about a specific barcode and we don't have the ability to do it. Pretty much every barcode I've ever been asked about is here in our symbologies. And if it's not, it can probably be added relatively easily. I know our development team, is constantly looking at the different styles of barcodes that are out there and what we might cross, because obviously our jobs change all the time as new barcoding styles and symbologies are created and introduced to the workplace. We do also have the ability to do QR codes. That's a pretty common hot button topic. QR codes are in here just in that symbology. You can change it to a QR. You can also see up here we have the ability to change QR settings and things of that nature. Let's just look at how this works. So if I change it to code 39, you see my barcode change. Just real simple. Keep it at code 128, and that's going to be your default code. Anytime you add a barcode, it's going to default to that code 128 there for you. And typically too, if it's not specified to change your symbology on a barcode, code 128 is a good way to go. It's a easy readable barcode. We don't have a lot of issues with it. So, all right. So that's how you do the two main fields, text and barcode. As we continue through this object section here, again, we have images, like I mentioned before, and we're going to talk about when we customize our label. With images, you have the ability to either hard code an image, which is just going to pull an image from a file path on your computer, or you have the ability to set it up to pull data from SAP. So if I pull this to the screen here, this is my image box. This is where the image will fill into. And if I go over to the side, if I'm going to hard code, that's done here. Image source, source base 64. And we're going to go through this in a bit here, but you would just click this ellipse and it would take you to your file explorer to select the image that you want to pull the label. We're going to do that in a bit, so I'm not going to go too far into that right now. But if I wanted to pull something from SAP, again, same thing, data in data field, just like barcode and just like a text field. And what we do in that case is, let's say you have an image attached to your item master, and every time you create a label, you want it to pull the correct picture of the item on that label, right? So whatever item code is passed in here, we want to pull this picture. You would just find that field in SAP Business One, or whoever is writing the query for you. They would find that field in SAP Business One, add it to your query. We would select it in here. So it might be called something like picture or picture one, what have you. You would select it here. And then every time you print that label, it would pull that image from SAP Business One to the label. So, in that case that I brought up before, it would pull the correct item image to the label every single time. And then lastly, up top, we do have the ability to handle RFID. Not something we're really going to talk about today, but you simply just click your RFID chip there and you're able to just insert it onto the label and enable RFID scanning. And then we have the shape fields. That is simply for structure of the label, adding things like a border or a line to break something up. So, we can see those below here. Here's a line. Here we use a rectangle to give us a border on our label. Those things are very common. Typically that's going to be the last step. You get the data on the label, you get your label set up, and then we add some of those things to break it up and make the appearance of the label a little bit easier on the eyes in the warehouse. And again, drag and drop, really simple, really similar to a Microsoft product. See here with a line, I just simply draw it on there, and there you go. Lastly, too, and one thing you're noticing here, we have the ability to arrange just the same as you would with something like a PowerPoint or Microsoft Word. So that's the ability to send things back, bring things forward. If you noticed, I had an issue clicking on this line here because it's selecting the rectangle because it's set up in front of the line as far as my arrangement is concerned. So I'm just going to simply send that to the back. That's something you'll notice a lot when you have borders. And now it's easier for me to click on my line as well. Those are some tools that sometimes you don't really think about them, but they save you a big headache because if you click on that border every time, you're going to start moving it around and, the whole structure of your label will get out of whack. All right. So those are your general settings here in Label Designer. That's what you can do. The biggest takeaway from this is, once the query is in place, it's pretty easy. Getting the structure of the label sorted out and everything like that is simply drag and drop, place it, size it, and all you have to do after that is do the mapping of what the field's supposed to say or what the barcode's supposed to say, and you're ready to go. Very similar to the style of Microsoft products with that structuring, arranging, different things like that. But now we've done our overview. So let's go ahead and get into our custom label. So before we do that, let's jump back and take a look again at what we're supposed to get to. So here is our goal. This is the label we're trying to get to. As you can see, we're just adding batch information below, adding an image, and doing a little bit of rearranging here. The first step on this, we're going to go up here and we're going to do an open. I'm going to just reopen this label because I don't want to have a label that I made some changes to. I want that standard out of the box goods receipt PO. So I'm just going to pull that back up because I played with it a little bit. Now I have that out of the box goods receipt PO here. Now after that, we're going to do a save as and save it as our new label. So I'm going to go ahead and call that lab GRPO. You can see I already have one here because I've done this, several times. I did this for our partners and I did some test runs, but typically you're going to be naming it and it's going to be a whole brand new document. I'm just going to overwrite my current lab GRPO. Now we have our lab GRPO label. The reason we do this is, a couple of reasons really. Number one, if you rename the label, you're not going to ever run the risk of overwriting the label if you re-import our standard WiSys labels, which obviously would be an issue if you made changes to this, kept it as that standard GRPO naming, re-imported the WiSys labels, you would overwrite everything that you've done. And then another reason for that too is we want to keep a copy of that original label no matter what that we can refer back to in case we make a mistake or in case down the line we need to create another label and we want to remember how the out of the box WiSys label worked. That's going to be your starting point. That's going to be an easy label for you to refer back to and know that it works in the system and is intended to always work in the system. So that's why we save it as a different naming convention. Now, the first real step to customizing this label here is going to be doing our query. And like I said, this is not a query writing class, so we're not going to talk too much about it. I actually have a query that I had wrote beforehand that I'm going to drop in, but I'm going to explain a couple things here for you. So I'm taking a query that I had written and I'm dropping it in here. And that may be something that you do. You might write a query on another tool and drop it in here. If you do that, you're going to notice everything comes through blue like this. It doesn't have that same WiSys query designer format. So what I'm simply going to do here is hit format SQL, and it's going to bring it to that same structure. It's going to bring in my new tables down here below in the query editor, and everything is going to look uniform with how our query designer typically looks and works. Now in here, you see I'm using that same parameter, that doc entry parameter, because that's what we need for our GRPO form that works out of the box to communicate with this GRPO label. Again, if I change that to doc number instead of doc entry, that's not the way that the form interacts with a label. So, it would cause some issues with our out of the box form. We want to make sure we have that linkage correct. And a good way to know we have that correct is to use the out of the box labels as a starting point. Now, if I want to make sure my new query works, simply all I did also here is just add my batch number into my select statement so that I can access it and, of course, do the table joins to bring that in. Now, if I want to make sure this works, I'm going to hit validate SQL. Validation completed successfully tells me there's no issues with my query. It's pulling data and basically it's ready to use. So I can go ahead and hit OK there and save that. All right, and now I'm going to close that and we have our new query and our batch data is ready to be used. So before I set up those batch fields, I'm going to go ahead and do the label restructuring that needs done, and that's going to simply be up here with my item code. So I'm going to pull my item code over to the right and I'm going to pull it up a bit. Based on my specs, I want to leave, I believe, one block on my, 2 blocks on my grid. So here's the right side of the label. I'm going to leave 2 blocks on my grid here. And I'm also going to leave 2 blocks between item code and item barcode and 1 block between the barcode and the batch. Okay, so I want to move that over 1. I'm also going to shrink my label a bit because it is a tad bit bigger with all the data that we need to pull here. It's a tad bit too big. I'm going to pull that over to the same spot. It's just going to line up right below my item code, 2 blocks below it on the grid. Make sure it's the same length. Pull out this side one more time. As you can see here again, basic drag and drop and resizing really similar to tools I'm sure that you've all used or at least seen quite a bit. All right, and then we're going to move this field up one below it. Now that that structuring is done and we have our space here for our logo, we're going to take care of this batch information. So this description field is going to change into our hard-coded batch field. So to do that, again, we're going to go down to data field here, clear out description. We're going to come back up to text, and we're going to hard code that to say batch. Now that it says batch, we want to get it, if you look back at our label spec here, we want it to be the same size. So we're going to go up to our item code and we're going to check out the same size and font here. We're looking at Arial for the size, or Arial for the font, and our size is 14. So I'll jump back down to my batch field. I'm going to resize that to 14. It is set up to be Arial already. And now you'll see it's cutting off the bottom of my batch field as well. So we need to go ahead and resize our field so that it can fit that entire bit of text there with the new size and length. Pull that down a bit. Now we see our whole field is in the box there. Now I'm going to deviate a little bit from my spec sheet here. So when I look at the spec sheet, it looks a little bit jumbled to me. It looks like there's just a lot of information on there. It's not as easy on the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and bold this batch here with the hopes of that kind of separating the two sides of the information and separating out our label a little bit, making it a little easier to read. So if I jump back over to Label Studio, I'm going to click on that on my text field, go up to Appearance, click on Font. I'm going to just go to this bold field here, and I'm going to make it say true. And now I've bolded that field. It makes it a little easier to read, and I'm hoping that it will split up our label here a bit and not have everything so compressed together. Now I'm going to add a new text field. I do have the ability to just draw it on here. When we talk about that drag and drop again, same thing. I can just draw the field on and start working off of that. Now, if I do that, not only do I have to assign the data field, I also have to go through those steps I just did to make it the same font size, all of that good stuff. So instead of doing that, a shortcut that we can do here, well, let me delete that. A shortcut that we can do here is just copy and paste our item code field. That's going to keep that same structure, so that same font size, same font, all that good stuff, without us having to go, completely revamp the whole field and enter all that information in what would be a third time in this case. We're just going to copy that, and it's going to copy over the exact same look of this item code field. Now we did that, we're going to want to change our data field here to pull that batch number. And we're going to go back up here to our font, make sure everything looks good, Arial 14. And again, batch number, yep. For some reason it didn't change my text, so let's change my text there to batch num. Click over here, and that'll take place. And now our field is changed to be that batch number data from SAP Business One. And again, by copying and pasting that there, saved me some time because I cut out all the steps of having to change the text. I knew the text was going to be right. It's going to look right. I just had to change that mapping so it pulled from the right field in the SAP system. And again, I can also look at this roller here above to make sure everything lines up and is centered correctly. So if we look at that, we're nice and centered there between our 4 inches on our label. If we go above, we see the same here for that bolded batch field. And now the look and feel of the label looks pretty good so far. And we're going to go ahead and create our barcode. So here, when we go to create our barcode, we could do the same thing. We could copy and paste, but that doesn't really save much time because, again, this is a very standard barcode. Typically, our barcodes are going to be code 128. So again, all you really have to change is that data field. So rather than, copying it, having to, restructure that and make sure everything's in the right space, we're just going to draw this one on. Go ahead and pull this field up. we want at least one cube on the grid below and above, one below our text and one above this line. The reason for that, and if you notice my spec, we did not have that. The reason for that is we want to make sure there's adequate space for that barcode. We don't want things jammed together too much because when we go to scan our barcode, it might cause an issue with the reading. So in this case, this barcode probably would have scanned fine, but I'd rather not take the chance. I'm going to make sure I leave one cube on the grid between the barcode and the field just to prevent any issues with scanning. So here, my barcode has that one cube on both spots. And if we look at my roller up here, looks pretty good, looks pretty centered. I might be able to bring that in a tiny bit. And I would say that looks nice and centered there for us. So now we're going to go ahead and assign it the data. We scroll down to our data field. Here it is. And once again, we just go down to that batch number, click off in the gray, and it's assigned the correct field. We see we got our blue symbol there telling us we're pulling data from SAP. And we also got our human readable text here that says batch number. Now I don't want that human readable text. That's counterintuitive because I already have batch number information up there. So I'm just going to scroll up above here to appearance, down to text, and we see batch num here. I'm going to just clear that out. Click off in my gray space, and now that barcode is on there and complete. If I check back over to my spec sheet again, I would say the label I have looks pretty similar. Might not be perfect. Sometimes it's hard to match things perfectly to an image, but I'd say it's pretty similar, pretty much the same thing. And now we're ready to go ahead and add our image. So I'm going to click on my image box here and go ahead and draw this on. Center it. Now I see where my image box is. I feel like that'll look pretty nice. I think that's good centering. I think it's a good fit for the label and things aren't too jammed. I might actually move it over one space to the left. No, I don't like that. All right, pickiness on my part, but I think that looks best there. Now I've drawn that image on, I got to go link it up. So again, if we were using a data field from SAP, we would do that above here in the data tab. But in this case, I'm going to hard code it with just an image that I have saved on my computer. And I'm going to use my WiSys logo. So I go to source base 64 under image source, click on the three dots, and it brings me over here to my file explorer. I'm just going to scroll up to the right location here. I have a WiSys logos folder. I'm going to go into there and select my WiSys logo. And now you're going to see it drops it onto the label in monochrome. That is done on purpose because a lot of the time when you print labels, you're going to want to print them in black and white. That's very common. But in this case, we have a color label printer. We're not worried about it being black and white. We want that colored logo on there. We want to show our WiSys pride and have our logo on there correct. So I'm going to go over to the side here, go up to convert to monochrome. And I'm just going to take that from true to false. And now you'll see I have my original image there with the color, with that golden pyramid on there. I have my WiSys logo, and now my label is ready to go. If we match that back over to our spec sheet one more time, you'll see it is nearly the exact same label. We followed our spec sheet, and we have a good finished product. So we want to test here and make sure that this label can actually pull data from SAP. So I'm going to go up to my preview, save my changes. And here in your preview, you're just going to enter in a value for a GRPO that you've done in the past, a finished GRPO, something that would have printed a label, if it were set up at the time of doing the GRPO. So I'm going to go in here, going to do 845, which is an old GRPO for me. Save that. And now we see here, it looks good. It pulls the data correctly. The label looks the way I want it to. I have that preview there. I'm happy with the look and feel of it. And now I'm ready to hook it up in my system. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open up Agility Explorer. For anyone that's not familiar, that's our desktop product. Again, you can go to that same file path in the program files x86, WiSys bin folder to access it, or you may have a shortcut. The shortcut would be AE for Agility Explorer on your desktop there. Once we open that up, we're just going to go to File here in the top left corner. We're going to go to our Documents. And this is going to open up the WiSys Document Manager. From within here, we're going to need to locate where that label needs to live. So in this case, we're doing it for a GRPO. So we're going to go to Purchasing. And then we're going to go to our PO Receiving folder here. That's what we're going to be doing on the handheld to actually create the GRPO and print this label. And when we open that up, a good sign here is that we see our out of the box GRPO label that we copied sitting there turned on in the folder. Any labels that are grayed out here are not turned on, they're disabled. And that's what we're going to go ahead and do to the out of the box label, because now we don't want to use it anymore. We want to use our new custom label here. So I'm going to just right click on this, go to Properties. Cool. Sorry about that. Go to Properties, and then from within here, let's talk about a couple of options you have first before we go ahead and set this up. And we'll talk more about documents in a later Learning Lab session. But from within here, we do have the ability to, identify, okay, are we printing it portrait or landscape orientation? We have the ability to change the number of copies. Let's say we wanted to label every side of the box. We can print 4 copies each time. Of course, I'm just going to do one for this. We can also set up a print prompt that's going to prompt you as soon as you go to print a label. It's going to ask you how many you want to print, and you can then identify, oh, I want to print 3 this time, type it in, and it'll print that many for you. Now, in this case, I'm going to keep it real simple because we're just trying to see if our label works from the handheld application. So I'm just going to leave it with the general settings, save that. Oh, I just did that all to the GRPO I wanted to disable. So we're actually going to go into this regular out of the box label and disable that first. I got ahead of myself. Now you see it's gray. Now it's grayed out. We're not using that out of the box one. Now we're going to do the steps I talked about. After right clicking on it and selecting new, we're going to go find our label we just created. So if I go here in my path, it's going to bring us to our WiSys doc folder that we talked about earlier, where all of our labels are sitting. I'm going to click this drop down and switch from Crystal Reports to Agility Labels. And now I'm going to find that lab GRPO that we just created here together. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And this is where I intended to be before, where we can just save this and add it as an enabled label in our system. So now you see I disabled our original one. It's grayed out. We can confirm that's all disabled. I right clicked here, selected new, and I was able to add my new lab GRPO label underneath of there. It's set up to be enabled. So that is the only one that's going to be in color here. All the other labels are grayed out. Now we know we're good to go. Our only label set up to print there is our new lab GRPO label. So now at this point, we'll hit OK. We're done here in Agility Explorer. We can go ahead to our handheld device. So what you're going to see here is that I have an emulator emulating Agility 360, exactly how it looks on a handheld in your warehouse. And I'm just going to go ahead to our out of the box goods receipt PO form under distribution in Agility 360. And once this form loads, I'm just going to go through the standard process here of scanning, and we're going to try and get our label to trigger here. So first, I'm going to scan my purchase order. Then I'm going to scan my item. And I'm going to scan my new batch, which is what should pull to our label, B000. I'm going to enter in a quantity of 1, hit enter. And the way this out of the box form works is it's actually saving everything to a preload table. So we have the ability to save it all to a preload table and post the full goods receipt PO with each item in one transaction there, instead of creating a different GRPO per item. But you do have the ability to just do, one item at a time if that's how you want to do it, which is what we're going to do in this case. So I did my item, I saved it to our preload table. Now I'm ready to post my GRPO. Just going to go to my post button, And upon posting, it's going to automatically trigger the label printing process. And you can see here, it's printing the correct label. We see Lab GRPO up there at the top. I'm going to print it to screen. And we're going to see our nice new label with our batch information, pulling that correct batch B000 with our WiSys logo there in the top left corner. And now we successfully created the label based off of the specification sheet, set it up to print from the handheld, and printed it from the out of the box form. And just to reiterate here, the only thing that we tailored or customized or did anything to here is the label. The out of the box, WiSys form is able to communicate with it because we copied the out of the box label, and nothing else in WiSys needed tailored to do this. We just simply made changes to the label. So I hope that you found that informative. That's a little bit of an advanced label there for you. It's basically doing everything that you'll ever need to come across. There may be some things that are a bit more advanced, and you may come across some things I didn't go over today, but in general, most cases, these are the types of things you're going to need to change for a label, and this is the most advanced style of label that you will need to make. So just to reiterate here, if we jump back over to the PowerPoint, what we covered today, we walked through that general label designer overview and talked about all the different settings and types of fields and how to do things. We jumped into customizing a standard WiSys label, and we did that by rearranging the label, adding a barcode, adding a text field pulling data from SAP, adding an image, and then setting that label up to print in Document Manager from our Agility Explorer desktop application. And then we had that new label print from our out-of-the-box GRPO form on Agility 360. So that's everything we did today. And again, I would say 90% of the time that you're doing a label, those are the steps that you're going to need to do, and that is the ideal process. You can just take one of our labels, make the changes necessary, update the same location that original label was in, and you'll be good to go. So I hope you guys learned something today from that. If you need additional enablement on this, go ahead and reach out to me directly. I can get you to the right members of our team to help you, whether that's a consultant. I mean, if you know who your consultant is, you can reach out to them directly as well. But I can also point you in the right directions. And, our goal here is to teach you as much about the product as we can. And with that, we have about 12 minutes left here. I was a little bit more long-winded than I wanted to be, but we still got 12 minutes for questions. So if we have any questions, my partner Aaron is here moderating the chat. You can go ahead and send any of those to him, and we can try and answer them in the next 10 minutes or so here.
Yeah, Chase, one of the questions that I can answer is that they asked how do you get the label designer, and that comes with all versions or all licensing levels of our product. So if you've purchased the Essentials product or even the Fulfillment, you will get a little Agility Label Designer included with that at no additional charge. You'll just need to go to the path that Chase was talking about earlier and create a shortcut to your desktop where you can use the desktop solution on your computer. So yeah, you all will be getting that, or all have that capability of using this label design software. We do support GS1 barcoding. That is something that you'll want to review with your business analyst and or consultant. If you want to develop a solution for GS1 barcoding, WiSys can handle that. One of the questions here, so that's a pretty easy one. We'll definitely want to scope out that GS1 barcoding needs for your company. And then we do have another question that's coming here. Is it possible to add, so this one's for you, Chase, is it possible to add a comment at goods receipt time through handheld to go onto a table, onto label? So if you want notes or comments, yeah, okay, go ahead, Chase.
Yeah, if you want to pass a comment, so let's say, now that would be, that gets a little bit outside the span of what we did here today, because you would also have to tailor the goods receipt PO form that I used there. You would add a field there to type in a comment, right? So if we add that field to type in the comment, at that point the comment's getting passed. We would just look at where we map that, which is pretty standard. And then we would pull that field that we're mapping it to to your label. So in that case, we would just simply add the field to the handheld so that you can enter it in at the time the goods are CPO. Then we'd add that same field to the label and it would display on the label for you. Any field that
Gotcha.
you use in SAP, whether it's a UDF, it doesn't matter. We can pull that to a label, no problem.
Yeah. And that's just some of the things that our customers like to do is have their own unique information. So that is some tailoring, but we'll be able to help you through that one. And Tony asked if we're going to record this copy of this webinar. And Tony, you'll all be receiving a recording of this webinar at the conclusion, probably sometime this afternoon, but everybody will get a copy of this recording to review later on.
Yeah, definitely. And we have limited time here on the Learning Lab sessions, but this is a really good situation here for you guys if you have the chance to take the label designer software and walk through this same process here step by step and build out a label. It's a really easy way to do it. And like I said, I mean, most of the time, this is exactly the process that you're going to use when creating a label because you probably know what you need it to look like and you're going to refer back and forth to a document and try and build that same label. So this is a good test situation, this recording here for you guys to kind of get comfortable with that process and the software.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have, Chase.